ahead. Okay, thanks very much, everyone. I just want to ask everyone to come back in and settle down. That'd be great. Thanks very much. Thanks a million. Okay, that's great. So we're going to continue on this morning. We're delighted that we have 5 more short presentations this morning. And then we're also looking forward after lunch to a panel discussion and to opening it up to you guys to have a more open chat from the floor about all the issues and thoughts and ideas that have come up over the course of the day. There are also some brochures on your chairs that give a kind of an outline of the format for the day, and also more detailed biographies for the participants and speakers during the day if you want to find out a bit more out about anybody at all. We're going to kick off this session after the break with a discussion with Rosaleen McDonagh. We're going to hear from a playwright. Rosaleen has been at the forefront of challenging, provocative work for theatre for quite a while. We've had a great pleasure in Fishamble of working with her on 2 occasions. Once with her play Rings, which we produced in the Project Art Centre and then in the Kennedy Centre in Washington, D.C. And then more recently a co-production with Project last year when we co-produced Mainstream. And it raised all kinds of interesting questions and issues, particularly about the representation of travellers and people with disabilities on Irish stages. So she's going to be talking to us in conversation with Jen Coppinger. So we're delighted that Jen has stayed with us to come back a second time. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Jim.
Great.
Hi, everyone. I'm back. So it just struck me in the brief conversation that Rosaleen and I were having right before this one that earlier on all the statistics we were looking at were all regarding gender and nothing really to do with diversity. So I suppose just to kind of open up that provocation, I would like Rosaleen to respond to that.
How do you respond to that?
Yeah.
You know, I'm tired of having to live it, having to talk it, having to represent it, and then having to fucking write it.
Yeah.
I hope we're moving. I know this is a cliche, but I mean, I know in my community and the world I live in, be it travellers or writers with disabilities, we're there. And in the past, women used the glass ceiling. We talk about the concrete block that's in our way, but nonetheless, we're chipping away.
Yeah.
And I do think Irish theatre is far poorer because of its lack of colour and texture around diverse ethnicities and diverse realities. I think we're all the more poorer for it.
I would agree. And what does that mean for you as a writer? Like when you are, it's a lot of pressure to have that on your shoulders. How do you cope with that?
Well, yeah, I suppose when I was younger, I was much more brazen, and I'd be full on. And I suppose as I've gotten older, I realised actually I need my energy for my work, not to be wasted by way of charting. I mean, if you look at it like this, plain and simple, access and representation within the arts. If you start off with the Arts Council, and for me, they're not a moniker of good practice. I mean, they're in a building that I can't get in.
Yeah.
That means hundreds and thousands people like me will never work there. We'll never sit on the board. We'll never be on education panels. We'll never be a staff member of the Arts Council. So I suppose with that in mind, I said, well, I need to diverse my talents if I have. I remember having a conversation with Jim, and he was saying the life of a playwright is very sporadic. I know this morning Caroline mentioned mostly men who had 14 or 15 plays over a 10-year period. I won't have that. And I think, not because of my impairment, but because of the world we live in, by way of artistic commercialism, it's no longer a play now it's about money and marketing, and I'm not always sure that we're vying against Netflix and all that. So I suppose for me, I deal with it by writing for radio, writing for TV, writing as a journalist. I've been really lucky, and again that luck was mostly Fishamble opened the door. They didn't necessarily have a prerequisite about diversity. Jim never sat down and said, I want to play about travellers. I want to play about women with disabilities. Or I want to play about this and that. I presented them the work, and within that, I suppose there was a kind of an acknowledgement that it would be difficult by way of, if you're a playwright and you're writing about the world you know and love and understand, and then you realise we've one or two male actors who are travellers. We have no females. We have no, I don't know them, and we searched the length and breadth of Ireland. We've no actors who are out about being disabled. They may well be disabled, but they won't get work when they come out. So I suppose for Jim and Fishamble and me embarking on a relationship about writing and theatre, and it's not been easy for them. I think it's been very easy for me. I just write the plays, and they have to deal with the fallout or the
consequences of the casting.
Of taking on someone like me, and I think it's very admirable.
It is, but it shouldn't be that extraordinary to write a play that has someone has a character with a disability. That shouldn't be such a difficulty to cast. But it seems to be difficult for those with a disability to work.
I'm honoured and minded. I've seen a lot of work by disabled artists and theatres who are diverse, and I'm still brought back to Tennessee Williams' last menagerie. It took 30 years after that play was written, 25 productions before they got an actor like Laura with an impairment. It took an awful long time. And that's, I feel, you asked me about being a writer. My job is, I suppose, for the generations of women and men, but mostly women who are coming under me. And they're chiseling away women who are travellers, women with disabilities who have chosen a huge, it's a very harsh environment to be a writer.
You have to be very brave.
Yeah, and also within our communities, particularly with the traveller community, you're not applauded. You're disgracing your family. People think you're exposing secrets of a culture that, and the reality is, most of the time, the nuances of settled culture and traveller culture are very subtle. You know, but it's, and we move on.
Yeah. And I suppose we were also talking about, you know, diversity in the broader scheme as well, in terms of, you know, people coming from working class backgrounds, people coming from areas of poverty, essentially, and not knowing how to navigate the theatre industry and the theatre landscape. So I think you should be really applauded for trailblazing that as well.
But I think we have to remind ourselves, when we talk about diversity, what does it mean? For me, it's about poverty, it's about lack of educational opportunities, it's about not going to theatre college, it's about not having the opportunity of being able to do a playwriting course. It might be about, I was on a panel last week and there were 5 other panelists who were non-disabled and very settled in all its
connotations.
Yeah, and one of them pointed out that an applicant hadn't filled out the submission properly. I remember, I saw what she saw that wasn't on the page. And that was about not knowing, not being able to spell, not being able to have a network around you and say, will you help me do this? Or how do I fill out a form? I know that's very basic, but for some people that's that.
Well, maybe we should challenge everyone in the room to try and help people in applications, give them a bit of assistance, give them some advice.
Panelists, we need to be aware.
Yeah.
You're there to get people through. You're not there to, you know, whittle out the rubbish.
Yeah.
They're not rubbish.
Great. Can I ask about your own work and how you've worked in terms of working with dramaturgs in the past, working on various shows, how that's gone?
Not very well, apart from Jim. I suppose, first of all, there was a lot of sexism, a lot of, this is the way we do things. And I'm not talking about the formula of playwriting. I'm talking about the step before that, when people actually, you know, one person said to me, you know, you have to be on time. And I said, but you were late. I was here, you know, during one of my productions, the director said, yeah, you know, travellers drink a lot. And I said, what are you saying? And he said, well, I'm just saying travellers drink a lot. And I said, well, I've never been drunk in my life. But it's that subtle racism and sexism that I suppose it's very difficult to call it out when it's the hand that's feeding you.
Yeah.
And also, as an older woman, I would be very clear about who I'd want to work with and who I wouldn't. I think at the moment, I'm not sure if other playwrights or female writers have experienced the backlash towards waking the feminists. I know I've certainly have had 2 particular experiences where men expressed the opinion that we just need a woman. We just need a woman to get the funding.
Dear.
And then I got told by a non-disabled male playwright who was working with a male director who was writing a play about disabled men. And they had it all sewed up. And then I remember it was the 17th of November. I got this email saying, there's no need to read it. Just, can we put your name on the application? I'm thinking, why would you do that? Why would you, you know, I'm a feminist. Do you think I'm thick?
And but I suppose, you know, there's also the kind of the positivity of like feeling probably outside of a club at one point of your life, and then very much in a cornerstone of the Irish theatre community. What's that like now? Well, we all do.
Well, I think there's something about a cultural, as a cultural spectator, as a critic. It's okay to be on the outside, but one thing that really, really changed everything for me was during the Carrick Mines tragedy on the third day, where the Rockville Road residents turned their back on the debris of the fire. I remember Jim phoned me, and we weren't working together. I wasn't over any deadlines. We were busy doing our own thing. And he rang to just say, are you okay? And for me that was about community, that was about respect and acknowledging where people are. In the same way that when Tom Murphy passed, you know, I'd pass on my
your sympathies.
No, but it was about going an extra mile. There's also a thing about being a member of a stona and recognising that your peers respect you. And you don't always realise that until, and then you think, fuck it, I'm in the club.
You can invite new people into the club now, it's great.
Oh, but I remember.
Yeah. So do you have advice for people today? Because I think that it's really important for us all to take on some responsibility here when it comes to diversity, when it comes to helping the next generations.
Then I'm not one for giving advice. And as you well know, I'm a bad role model. I did everything the wrong way around. But I would say that I suppose those of us who are perceived to be from diverse backgrounds have a responsibility. And what I mean by that is, and I've done it and I will continue to be sitting on the outside, giving out about people. But last January, was it February, March, you know Puff Baby?
Yeah, yeah.
And they were doing a series called
Where We Live in the Complex, yeah.
I thought they were cool and sexy and cutting edge and I remember just saying, I'm going to ask them, can I be part of it? And so a bit of it was me not waiting.
Yep.
Me saying, look, I have something good to offer. And that piece will be on radio now.
Great.
And that started with just saying to Billy, you're not as cool as you could be.
Fair enough. We're going to be running out of time now in a minute and 45 seconds. So does anyone have any questions for Rosaleen before we drop the mics?
No, that was a
yeah.
no. That was a no.
great. We might. Yeah.
You mentioned like people who probably haven't ever like had the chance to just go to like playwriting courses or anything like that. How do you progress without having that as someone's like in the very beginning?
Well, it's that old chestnut, isn't it? Can you be taught writing? Or is it in you? I believe it's a bit of both. Gavin and Jim will tell you, I still have problems with structure. You know, I know that I always need a dramaturg, and that's fine. But I think it's not so much what you do, or it's just being aware that other people don't have that opportunity. And just being aware. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great.
It's not a very profound answer, but...
Yeah, no, it is. Okay, so let's all be aware. Thanks, Rosaleen.
Thanks so much, Rosaleen and Jen, for that really enjoyable conversation. It's really interesting, yeah, as well as those two full-length plays we did. Gavin just reminded me we also had a tiny play for Ireland from Rosaleen when we started that process, and then recently we also produced a short play of hers for the Traveller Ethnicity Day, the first anniversary marking Traveller ethnicity. And it's been an amazing experience, and Rosaline's so generous there, the way she's talked about the collaboration. But really, we've learned so much also in Fishamble, and I suppose just thinking today about playwriting and about dramaturgy and dramaturgical questions, you know, it's really interesting just hearing Rosaline talk about working with a dramaturg, but also we've had to think about dramaturgy, I suppose, in a different way to normal. You know, I remember we were working on a play, I hope I got this right, where we were saying like a character seemed to contradict himself in one scene from a previous scene, and I remember saying to Rosaleen, "Oh, is that, you know, why is he doing that? Was he lying the first time? Is he pretending the second time?" And Rosaleen said, "Oh no, he just says two different things. He contradicts himself." I said, "Yeah, but the audience might think that he's saying it for a particular reason, and they might wonder, and they might get confused." And Rosaleen said, "I think the settled people might get confused, but travellers don't really think like that, so they won't get confused." And I said, "Oh yeah, well that's a great, you know, but that's great. But can we not just, you know, should we not change this to sort of make sure that the travellers and the settled people all kind of, you know, don't get confused?" And Rosaleen, in a brilliant, wonderful, sort of twinkle in her eye, but a provocative way, said, "So you want me to change my play to suit the settled people in the audience? Is that what you're saying?" So we had, so I suppose for me it was a real reminder, like we use the word diversity so much. And of course, Rosaleen, you know, is one of us, but she's bringing a vision and an authentic view of traveller culture and the lives of people with disabilities to us. But that then also means that we as a company need to shift our view of what we think, you know, makes a play work, because, you know, or do we need to try and wrestle with everyone and get people to sort of fit into our view of dramaturgical kind of order. Though what Ruth was saying earlier about just, you know, those positive tensions bristling against each other, you know what I mean, is so interesting in terms of all that. Anyway, we might come back to those things later on today. Thanks very much for that. So we're joined next, I'm delighted to say, by Rebecca Mairs. Rebecca is the literary manager at the Lyric Theatre in Belfast. She's our voice today from Northern Ireland to talk about some of the opportunities and activities up in the Lyric. We're also delighted. Our current initiative, Play for Ireland, is being run in association with 6 venues around the country. So the 30 writers are all based in the 6 venues for the year. We've 5 plays being developed in each venue, and the Lyric is one of those. Venues, and they're a great partner to work with. So I'm going to pass you over now to Rebecca. I think you're going to. Are you going to use this microphone or?
Yes.
Or that one?
Microphone.
Yeah, great. Yeah. So I'll give you this one. Great. Thanks very much.
Great. Hello, everyone. Can you all hear me? Okay. Great. Okay. Firstly, thanks very much, Fishamble, for organising today and inviting me to speak. It's absolutely brilliant for the Lyric to be included in these conversations. So today. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the Lyric, a bit more about my role there, and hopefully a lot more about how we support new writing. Is that useful? Great. So, because we would have been up the creek, if that is it. So I suppose kind of a basic question is who's been to the Lyric? Oh, great. Fantastic. So I'll keep this bit really, really brief. So the Lyric Players is our fantastic space. We're very privileged to have it. The Lyric Players was founded in 1951 by Mairs O'Malley. And I kind of want to pause for a moment because the name is actually very important. Mairs O'Malley was a huge and passionate lover of the works of Yeats, and that's why we're called the Lyric. So it's always been kind of a very kind of a literary theatre, and we like to think of it as a theatre for writers. So the theatre was initially run under the O'Malley's house, an extension into the garden, but by the 1960s the company's reputation was such that they were able to fundraise for a dedicated theatre on the banks of the Lagan, which opened in 1968. So this year is really exciting because it's the 50th anniversary of us being on that spot. In 2011, after years of further fundraising, a brand new modern theatre was opened to the public. I think I speak for everyone who works there that we're incredibly lucky to have the privilege to work in such a beautiful space. So for those who don't know the theatre, we have two spaces. The main stage holds 394 people. We produce about 8 to 9 of our own shows in this space each year. For the last 2 to 3 years, about 3 of these shows of the 8 have been new plays. We also have a studio space which holds up to 119 people, and this is really much more versatile, dynamic, busy space. It's used a lot by local independent companies and touring productions, and last year we hosted 36 visiting shows in that space. So that's just really quickly a brief overview of the building itself, but I'm here to talk to you about what I do, which is overseeing the literary department, which is a total misnomer because it's just me. I joined Lyric in August 2016 after working for a spell in the visual arts, and before that at Northern Ireland Screen. I was saying at the break there, I think I've got literally 2 months worth of saying I'm new here before I need that has run out, that is expired. Theatre is my first love though, and I've been involved in one way or another since I was about 11. The role of literary manager was a brand new one, and one that was very hard fought for. For decades, the Lyric has been at the forefront of commissioning and producing new writing in Northern Ireland, debuting new work by Stuart Parker, Mary Jones, Graham Reid, Christina Reid, Gary Mitchell, Conor McPherson, the prolific Rosemary Jenkinson. The list goes on and on. When I started, the job description was incredibly broad, and to be honest, another person would have come in and done something totally different with the role. But for me, these two things struck me as absolutely fundamental to the job. So to initiate support structures for writers and theatres, and that's both new and established, and to champion, support and promote new writing in Northern Ireland, by which I take to mean both to support Northern Irish writers and to develop the local audience to create an appetite for new writing. And in the rationale for my post even existing is this vital point. If we're to develop theatre in Northern Ireland, we must find a way of encouraging and developing new writing. This point is so important. Writers and new writing are the lifeblood of the theatre, and despite all the economic pressures, and these are considerable, and they're very much pressures in the north at the moment, we have to find a way to make it happen, no matter how difficult it can be at times, like now. So, the biggest shift really since I started has been to open up the theatre to new writers. I think there was a sense that the Lyric was perhaps a bit of a closed shop, and it only worked with a small circle of tried and tested sort of big name writers. And the Lyric really wanted to change all that and make the theatre much more approachable and accessible to all writers, regardless of experience and background. So, how do we make new writing work at the Lyric? We do it in 3 ways: doing co-productions and developing partnerships, offering dedicated new writing initiatives, and by commissioning writers to create new work. We do about 3 productions each year, which are co-productions. Here's some examples: The Nest, which was with the Young Vic in 2016, which is new writing, and Far Below, which is also new writing, which is October just last year with the Abbey. And it's very important that we forge and maintain co-production partnerships across Ireland and the UK. co-production is just a really obvious way of pulling resources and getting new work to the stage, and also showing that new work to different audiences. And also it's great to work with different companies and different creative teams. We also support independent production companies by working in association. So here we aren't providing cash support, but we are contributing by providing in-kind support like rehearsal space, marketing, and or stage management or tech support. So on the right here, you have Laurel Life's production of The Sword in the Sand, which is a new play by Pierce Elliott, which is just about to close this weekend on Sunday, quick plug. And in June, we're absolutely delighted to be supporting Belfast Ensemble, which is a kind of a fairly new company, to bring a new and experimental piece of theatre to the Naughton based on the fall of the House of Usher. And that's happening over the APAC conference, by the way, just if anyone's up for that. So that's how we work with companies to bring new writing to the stage. But another big part of my role is obviously working with commissioned writers. Good Vibrations is coming up in September. That's a really exciting project, and that's a commission based on the award-winning film. And this is also a writing team that are completely new to the theatre, so it's been a great experience to work with them. And there we have Rosemary Jenkinson rehearsing Here Comes the Night, which was in 2016. So just again to give you a bit of an overview, for the past 3 or so years, we've been commissioning about 4 to 5 writers per year. Now, if you go back and look at how many new plays we're producing each year, you can perhaps see that there's a bit of an issue here in that we're commissioning more work than we can actually currently produce. And it was interesting hearing Jessie speak because you've got 14 projects on your slate at the moment, so we've got 12, which is a lot for the theatre of our size and the funding we receive, and also bearing in mind we're not kind of solely a new writing house. So at the moment, a major focus for me is now bringing those projects kind of over the line and hopefully into production. I just want to emphasise we're still very much open for business when it comes to commissions, but we'll probably be commissioning a bit less, certainly maybe this year, while we kind of focus on the slate. I thought this would also be useful to bear in mind for writers who are approaching us with kind of production-ready work. So a lot of writers are looking for development support, but often we'll get people saying, just produce me, please. I always say that we will always try to find a way to produce a great script that would be relevant for our audience. But this, again, is a situation I think is worth bearing in mind. So, new writing initiatives. In 2017, we launched the Lyric's first ever New Playwrights programme with an open call for scripts, which I think was, if not the first time ever, the first time in a very long time that the theatre had invited submissions. We had a great response. We had over 70 scripts last year, and this year we had over 100. And it was a brilliant way to see who was out there, what they were writing about, what they were passionate about, what stage they were at, what their expectations were, and to connect with them and to build relationships with these writers. And that's very much kind of an ongoing process. So the programme itself is for emerging writers. It offers 6 months of intensive development support with one-to-one feedback and peer review. The writers are also partnered with a director, and there are 2 readings of their work. One is a closed table read for development purposes only, but the second is a public reading in front of an audience and invited industry. Just a note on the showcases we had last year in October. They were held during the Belfast International Arts Festival, and the audience's numbers were fantastic. We sold out the first weekend, and we had numbers that if we had a show in that space, we would have been pretty happy. So again, it's about kind of developing the audience for new writing, getting them excited about what's happening at the theatre and bringing them behind the scenes. So I hope it's a great opportunity for the selected writers on the programme to develop in a supportive atmosphere and get their work out there. As part of the programme, there's also a masterclass series, which is absolutely free and open to all writers. We get a great turnout at these, and it's a chance for writers to hear from industry professionals and also to do a bit of networking. Here are some of our writers from last year, with Rosemary, again, who was our writer in residence last year. And Julie Campbell, who's our Arts Council representative. So since the programme, they've all gone off to do really exciting things. Seamus, on the left there, was brought into the BBC NI Writers' Room as a direct result of the programme. Both Seamus and Victoria, who's on the far Playwright there are part of Fishamble's Play for Ireland, and we're delighted to have them attached to us. Attached to us, like physically, like can't get away. Erica, in the Great Jumper in the middle, has had her London debut, which got fantastic reviews, which compared her to David Ireland and Martin McDonagh. What else could you want? And she's taking work to Edinburgh this year. And Andy, who's not in this photo, unfortunately, because he was unwell that day, his acting career has really taken off, but we're still in touch about his writing and kind of getting drafts through for him. So those are all brilliant, and I hope long-lasting relationships. So here's some stills. This is our not in studio. So these are some stills just from our showcase. And there's Des Kennedy gesturing, saying something very, very insightful and profound about the work. Emma Jordan was our other director, and they were both absolutely fantastic, really brilliant with the writers and understanding new writing. And I know the writers got a lot out of working with them, and again, I really hope those relationships are long-lasting. The new playwrights for this year are due to be announced today, I think, or this afternoon, or definitely tomorrow. So I wanted to kind of do a reveal, but I can't. So you have to keep your eyes peeled for social media. But they're a really, really exciting group. It's a really good news story this year, and we've already started work. So while the scheme this year is closed, it is an annual programme. So we'll hopefully be launching our call for scripts in the new year, so do keep an eye out. We've also got some other plans in the pipeline that I can't speak about just yet, but again, please keep your eyes peeled around January, February time. I kind of feel like the department is still a bit in its infancy. I come back to the thing about getting away with saying I'm new for a bit longer. But we really hope to grow and expand to really match the talent that's out there. The 100 scripts we got this year were of an incredible standard, but there are only a small number of spaces on the programme, so we're constantly looking for other ways that we can support writers and other theatre makers. And we're always open to partnerships, by the way, just in case there's anyone out there who wants to have a chat. In the meantime, our masterclass series this year's programme is ongoing. It's free and open to all, and any writers would be very welcome to come. We're also absolutely delighted to be working with Fishamble on the Play for Ireland over the next 2 years, and we're having conversations with Fighting Words Belfast to create a young playwrights programme. So that's my email address. Please drop me a line. Anything to do with new writing has a dedicated section on our website. It's in the About section, new writing. So do check that out. And of course, all opportunities are announced on social media, so it pays to follow us. That's about it. Thank you very much. If there's any questions, I'm happy to take them, maybe have a chat at lunchtime, but thank you. Thanks very much.
Thanks so much, Rebecca. That's great. Yeah, and people's contact details are in those brochures, and also ways to social media kind of links for Fishamble, our Twitter account and stuff is all in the brochure. People want to make comments about the day. As I mentioned earlier, the conference today is part of a wider programme of work in Fishamble's New Play Clinic, which is an initiative to support playwrights and the dramaturgical development of new plays. And we're very grateful to the Arts Council for funding and supporting the New Play Clinic, through which the conference is made possible. And also, on a personal note, very grateful to Rachel West, the head of theatre in the Arts Council, for discussions over the past couple of months as we planned today, and suggestions and thoughts about how the day might take shape. Rachel, before she was in the Arts Council, was working as a freelance director in Ireland and largely in Germany, and has all kinds of experiences of the dramaturgical processes in Germany, which are really fascinating. But also, of course, she's the head of theatre now at the Arts Council, and we're really delighted that she's joined us today. So thanks, Rachel. Hand over to you.
Hello. Thank you for having me, Jim and Gavin. And yes, I've enjoyed our conversations over the last 2 years now. I'm nearly in the position, but I'm still saying I'm new too. And obviously the similar conversations we've had with Stuart Parker Trust, who are here today, and also with Jimmy and the Lyric. And so it's an amazing position to be in, to be sort of part of conversations in lots of different directions. it's strange to be a practitioner who's not practicing at the moment, but it's wonderful to be part of and to see all the work through its various stages, and to be thinking about ways in which the Arts Council can do a better job, can do a more realistic job to the real gaps and needs that are in the sector. I will talk about the Arts Council, but I was going to just in the coffee break. So my background, yeah, I spent half my life working in Germany. It's a different system. It's got lots of money. So there's no point in kind of thinking about, let's do it that way, because we can't. But it was a very inspiring time, and I think what was probably very formative for me was, yeah, it's actually quite a long time ago, it was in the 90s, and there were no young writers in Germany at the time, and it was really recognized suddenly kind of as a gap and a dearth, and because the director is such a strong force in German theatre, they had sort of been creating the vision of the pieces, and the writers had sort of somehow been suppressed. So I happened to be in the right time at the right place to work with a young, well, it wasn't really a company, it was the Deutsches Theater set up a system to exchange with the Royal Court. And I think what really impressed on me was that it was really clear from those that knew at the time, I certainly didn't, that this would be a really slow process to grow writers from scratch, to grow the skill, to grow this is my Miss Jean Brodie bit, the kind of dramaturgical rigor that goes with creating and presenting a really good play. And we had amazing exchanges, first of all with mainly the Royal Court, where the English writers, you know, Sarah Kane, Mark Ravenhill, Tim Luscombe, all these people came over for, usually with their agents who were fierce figures who would sort of tear scripts and limbs apart in front of everybody, and it was quite frightening, but after the event, you kind of went, everyone sort of went back to their, wherever it is, wherever they write best, either with a group of people or in that dark room where it's just you and your words, and there was this sort of sense of like, really how can you improve it, how can we move it further, what are the questions, what are the relevant questions, what are the questions that I'm searching for myself, and which are the really relevant questions that are part of why I should be presenting this work to this audience. And I suppose that's sort of, that experience has informed a lot of the work I did as a director, and to come back 2 years ago and sort of see dramaturgy and dramaturg now is now a line on the Arts Council budget forms. It wasn't when I was working here 10 years ago, and so that's a really, really interesting development. And I think at one point, I think you were the only dramaturg in the village, really, weren't you? Yeah.
I just haven't had a training. I just copied it.
Okay, you just copied it. But there's a few more now, and that's great. And I think this today is an important point in that sort of evolution of Irish writing. Now, I think yeah, we've lost a great writer this week, and Tom Murphy would not have been a great fan of the dramaturg himself. But you know, and Irish writers have usually had, you know, such a great tradition of just writing the plays, and you just leave every single line as it is, and that's the way it's finished. And that is a brilliant way to write, if you're brilliant. And off you go. But I think some of us need more support and engagement, and I think what's really sort of evolving now, I think, is a sort of a new level of sort of critical engagement. Someone was talking about earlier on. I think that we need to kind of move on to that point where we understand what we're looking for, where we welcome those hard comments and those kind of that moment where you get to kind of get the person who you're actually quite frightened of in the room. And we have ITI and we have Theatre Forum, we have all these. Actually, as a sector, we're really well organised. I get to see where we look like from within the Arts Council, across all the art forms. They're quite jealous of theatre because we have a huge, well, we all have excellent communication skills. We know each other, we meet in places. It's a collaborative art form. And that's why I think, you know, the essence of really finding an Irish route to dramaturgical rigor and how we can work with constantly improving the work and making sure we stay relevant to our audiences, I think is really, really critical. So that's kind of my background, or where I've come from. At the Arts Council, my other job, or my current job, I'm sure you've all read Making Great Art Work. It's a good bedtime read. It's the 10-year strategy for the Arts Council, and there's a lovely little picture somewhere in the middle. I probably won't find it fast enough, but the artist and public engagement are at the core of this strategy, and it goes through every strand of awards that we are running, that we will look at the quality of the artistic aim, this one, and that the public is not just how we're going to get bums on seats, how many tickets are we going to sell. It's actually like, who is the audience? Has the applicant really thought about who they're writing for, how they're going to reach new audience, how they're going to reach a diverse audience, how they're going to reach young people, children education is another priority of ours. And as a sector, we're quite slow in looking at theatre for young audiences, looking at understanding the differences in the different age ranges. So there's been a lot of work done on that with TYA Ireland. So the Arts Council supports non-commercial professional theatre production in Ireland. It seeks to support artistic excellence both in the standard of practice and the level of ambition. The Arts Council recognises the many and varied ways that theatre artists work and aims to support artists whose work seeks to engage in a meaningful way with audiences across Ireland and beyond by supporting the creation, the development, production and dissemination of theatre. The funding structures support theatre in its many forms, from the classical and literary to experimental and contemporary, and recognise the diverse means by which theatre performance is created and produced. The Arts Council does not fund stand-up comedy, commercial theatre or amateur theatre productions, but recognises the valuable contribution they make to the art form. The Arts Council investment in theatre production is primarily through strategic funding, which is new since last September, and arts grants funding, which is currently in the workings of the Arts Council, which is why I won't be here after lunch, and project awards. I'd say most of you are familiar with the project award system. We have 4 strands, but maybe I'll say something about them shortly. So strategic funding is, we also have a set of sort of tailored schemes and individual and supports that are aimed at individual artists. So strategic funding supports the critical infrastructure required to sustain and develop theatre in Ireland. The quality of these recipients' work will be exemplary, will engage on a significant level with the people of Ireland, and will contribute significantly to the realisation of the Arts Council goals and priorities. Arts grants funding supports sort of the core of the theatre ecology and all its diversity, and supports the artistic vision of artists and arts organisations to develop a programme of excellent arts activities over a defined period of time. And projects awards, with its 4 strands, continue to offer support on a once-off basis to new and established artists and companies. Additionally, it's seen a significant amount of the touring scheme, the mixed art form festivals, and the young people in education's budget is also used for theatre. So I said that, but I'm going to skip through some of this because it's a little bit kind of arts council-y. So I think the main point probably for a lot of you would be the project awards and the 4 strands, and I've put kind of the different awards that are available onto just one sheet so you can see them. They do come, we are in the middle of changing our funding framework, so they could change, and my predecessor has said every time you have the opportunity, just make sure you say read the guidelines, read the guidelines, read the guidelines before you make your application, read all the guidelines, because they do change. They change not to catch you out. They change to respond to the sector and to needs and development needs, and also to our budget, which we always get at the end of the year for the following year, and we have to use it within that year. I think there's a lot of people who have worked in the Arts Council in the past and will continue to do in the future, where we say, well, our art doesn't work like that. You can't just apply and do it and finish it and sign off on it within 1 year. So we are moving towards a more sort of flexible approach. So arts grants funding, which is being considered at the moment, will actually be an 18-month funding program, and we will be looking towards more long-term or multi-annual awards and even bursary awards. So I was going to say the priorities over our next 3 years, we've divided the 10-year strategy into sort of 3 threes in a way. We hope to enhance the opportunities for artists by promoting more diverse partnerships. The theatre sector will be encouraged through the introduction of tailored schemes to strengthen the infrastructure by pursuing opportunities of mentorship, co-production, co-presentation and co-curation to ensure more work achieves its artistic potential and reaches more of its public throughout Ireland and beyond. We aim to enhance existing supports for individual artists at all stages of their career. We find that at the moment there is a particular age fracture on the project awards that tends to be under 35, and so we really want to, while there are various other programs that we would like to see the work kind of evenly across different ages, different genders, and obviously across all the diversity that is represented in Ireland. We want to enhance existing supports for, maybe to also include a mentorship scheme and multi-annual bursaries. Now this is something that we really hope to bring forward, but we are actually saying it now, which I'm delighted, because before we weren't in a position to. And I suppose this comes to where we are today, the dramaturgy and working with our strategically funded partners to bring people like today into a room and say, well, how could the mentorship work? How can we write the best plays that we want to write? What are the relevant plays for Ireland? What are the different art forms we want to work with within theatre? So I think the other point, I think, is if most of the companies have seen that there's been a real change in attitudes to public engagement. I think for the playwright it might be slightly different if you're writing in your garrison somewhere, but I think more and more we are seeing artists sort of encounter the questions of who your audience are, who you're writing for, and that responsibility for that, whether you can abdicate to a producer, an agent, a director, a company, but I think it's something more and more that we are certainly asking as one of our priorities in the Arts Council. So we would hope to continue to work to maybe clarify our definitions and objectives on this front a little bit more, and that we will also be working to require sort of engaged public engagement plans from our award recipients. And I suppose there's mainly sort of specific areas we would sort of be working on the next while would be develop the capacity in theatre to work consistently to self-define standards of best practice. So we have partners that we are in consultation with, but also that it's not the Arts Council necessarily driving the best practice. It's actually through our partners with ITI, for instance, recently with the conference that we had, which was so brilliantly run, that we can really sort of address the issues that are coming up through the sector. And that also we would have, we're looking to see if we can look at a best practice model for the support of artists and the development, production and dissemination of work. So we're really looking, we recognize that the company structure that was there in the Celtic Tiger years that we saw the figures earlier on, it's not as strong, you know, it's no longer there in its prolific nature as it was. So what can support the individual artists, the project recipients and the arts grants funding people who are working on project to project or working on a sequence of projects. And we also want to pay particular attention to the development of new work and to the supports offered to playwrights. And I think that's where it's kind of, we hope to encourage design methods of apprenticeship, mentorship and cultural leadership to support the pursuit of excellence in creative, artistic and technical practice. I'm going to shut that bit off now. I'm not sure if, I know usually there's we spend a lot of time fielding kind of technical questions about the eligibility of awards, and you can call us if you have those things, but I think there are, the way it works out with the 4 strands and project awards, we hope certainly in strand 1 and strand 2 to be making, and it's been there since before the New Works department started in the Abbey, that there has been the possibility to apply under strand 2 for funding for a space and an idea and to get some people into a room that you might want to work with before you actually have to have a finished script. That's more like strand 1. I'm just wondering if there, so strand 1 is a play development award. It supports the development of a new text for a live theatre performance. There's no requirement for a full production at the end. And strand 2 is the theatre creation. It's up to 25,000, supports the development of ideas for new work in a collaborative and interdisciplinary context. Again, there's no requirement for a full production at the end. I mean, that's the first step for most writers when they are applying to the Arts Council as an individual writer or theatre maker. We say the first access point is probably through the Projects Awards. The Project Awards do require a certain amount of support, and to sort of clarify, strand one requires that you have another body, one person working with you, a dramaturg, it could be a designer, a director, somebody who's going to help you interrogate your practice. And the reasons for this, it's not just a pure commissioning award as it used to be, it's really to sort of help you develop your practice as a writer, to have that other person there. It's develop those relationships. And I think we would probably say that most people who have ever been approached to be that person have usually entered into kind of a fruitful relationship. And I would encourage, I suppose, theatre makers to seek that person who's most fearsome with you, rather than the comfortable person. I could go through the individual awards, or I could just leave this here, and if you have questions, you can ask me. I think I'm getting to time, yeah, I'm not going to run through them all. Are there any specific questions that maybe we can come up to me in the break? Yeah, is that all right?
Thanks so much. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Rachel, for that. We're going to hear from our next speaker now. It's another playwright. Gavin mentioned earlier the route that we had working with Eva O'Connor through her winning the Fishamble New Writing Award for her play Overshadowed, and then taking part in a writing course, writing a short play that developed into a commission, and then a recent tour of Mairs and Bricks. We're going to hear later on this afternoon on our panel from Sonia Kelly as well, who's another playwright, I suppose, who's worked with a number of companies, commissioning plays and developing plays to a number of schemes or whatever. And we thought that both Sonia and Eva might be able to share with us a little bit kind of what it's like on the ground working as a playwright, what the initiatives and schemes they've used, what they found useful, and how their careers have progressed so far. So I'd like to welcome Eva O'Connor now to the stage. Thank you.
Do I have to use this?
Yeah, for recording purposes, yeah, because everything's being recorded for the podcast.
Hi everyone. My name is Eva O'Connor. It's lovely to be here in front of loads of friendly faces, and thanks very much for inviting me. I've spoken at a few playwriting things recently, and it's kind of a bizarre experience because I feel like no matter how much you write, and Gavin, I have actually written 7 plays. Some of them are better than others. Some of them are buried away, and you will never find them. But yeah, I think you never really feel like, you always have imposter syndrome. So I think the best thing for me to do now is just to kind of chat to you about how I ended up here. Gavin said on the phone when we were talking about this that I should talk about what a playwright needs. Oh no, he actually emailed me saying that, and then he said, I'll call you and we can talk about it, but he never called me. So I was like, maybe I'll just stand up and be like, an incredible social life, or like really good sex that helps you think. I don't know. I'll start with dramaturgical support. And I'm not really sure exactly who's here in terms of who's industry or who's like brand new to playwriting. Someone asked me at the break, what is dramaturgy? And I was like, ooh, I hope I give a good definition of this. But it's like basically somebody who helps you with your script or develops script ideas. I think they're like often the unsung hero of the artistic process, because so I started writing plays when I was about 19, and I went to university and I just like churned out a load of plays and got all my friends into my sitting room and, you know, did it that way, and started hiring faces and putting on work that was probably terrible, but I just did it anyway. And then after about 3 years, I met a girl called Hildegard, who I now continue to work with, and she kind of served as my first ever dramaturg, and it was like just a light bulb moment, because it was like my work just improved like about 100%. And I always think it's kind of unfair that they get less credit always at the end of the day, that they're kind of backstage really honing your craft. But yeah, I think that's actually hugely important for playwrights. So for example, on my last play, Mairs and Bricks, that was about the repeal referendum, kind of. Gavin was the dramaturg on it, and it was really important to me that it wasn't like just a play about like political polemics and, you know, one person shouting repeal and the other person shouting no, 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 because I think we have enough of that on the streets. So yeah, I really wanted to dig into all these other issues, like there's loads in it, like alcoholism and suicide and like masculinity in Ireland today, and why we have such a problem with angry feminists, and how women are always really encouraged to be silent. And I believe that is still the case. Like it's never cool to shout too loudly. It's never actually cool to say what you think. And I still feel that now. So I really wanted to kind of get into those issues, and Gavin really helped me with one particular point in the script, because basically the male character Bricks he's kind of against repeal in the beginning, but he comes around to it eventually, and he kind of goes on this journey. But towards the end of the play, he says to the other character, Maz, he's like, oh, you know, I would hate for what happened to you to happen to my daughter. Like, that would make me sick, you know? Like, I wouldn't let that happen to her. Like, I'd die for her. Like, I'd kill for her. And Maz says, well, she doesn't need a fucking macho bodyguard. She needs some respect. And, like, Gavin really helped me with that bit of the play where I couldn't quite make it work or understand exactly myself what I was trying to say. And Gavin will just talk to you, anyone who knows him, and say all these really flabbergasting, intelligent things. And you go away feeling really confused and your brain's tired. And then the next day you're like, oh, that's what he meant. And it kind of like, so it's like having like a key, you know, to help you unlock things. And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but I would really encourage anyone who's writing, like, find someone who'll give you feedback, or find someone who's on the same wavelength as you, or find someone who challenges you. Like the lady before me said, find someone who's fearsome. That can sometimes be good too. Like, you know, hand it to the person who you know will say, well, this is a pile of shite. So yeah, basically get your script to a place where you can get help, and then get help. That's dramaturgy. Money. We need money. For the people who are in the room who can provide it, we need more of it. It was so amazing to hear Rosaleen speak, because I think we, as a sector, we think we're so forward thinking, we're so great, we'll wear repeal badges, but we also have like such a cushy time of it as well, because most of us can afford to do this, or most of us can afford to write a play or take time to write a play. And like the best ideas come when you have time, when you can like let something percolate, when you're like flip. Like obviously deadlines are really important, but I really believe that we need like time and space to develop things, and you need money to live. Like if you have to, like I've been able to live mostly from working in this industry and a little bit in television over the last few years, and it's just changed entirely what I feel capable of making. Because if you're like everyone knows, if you're working 2 jobs and you're trying to write in the evening, you're just not going to really be able to write in the evening. And I don't know what the answer is in terms of the Arts Council or anyone else having funding bodies or whatever, but that's why I just think Fishamble are so great, because they really do. I sound like I'm sponsored by Fishamble, and actually lots of people do, but they're not. It's just that they're a really sound company and they really support people. And I think all those little things, like those courses that you can go to, like days, even like this, where everyone gathers, and maybe you were feeling depressed and isolated, or like you can't write before you came and then you leave feeling differently. Like those things are so important. And I think anything that can be offered to people, for like MAs in creative writing that cost 10 grand, like who's going to do them? And what kind of work are those kind of people going to produce afterwards? I'm sure some great work. And I went to drama school that cost way too much money. But you know, I really think like we have to look at ways of saying, how can we produce work like that people don't have to pay through the nose to go to things. Like I even have a massive issue with the whole drama school structure, because we make these false promises to people and they pay out money, and what's at the end? Like anyway, that's not part of my presentation. Time management I have down. I feel like if you don't have money, you need time management. You always need time management. But like, I think if you're like, okay, I have a full-time job, I'm not going to be able to quit and be a full-time playwright anytime in the foreseeable future, then just carve out some space and time. Be like, I always write on Saturdays, or I always write on Wednesday evenings, or I'm going to not go to yoga, or whatever it is, I'm going to do this instead. And I really think like, plays don't write themselves, and like it's really hard. Like you can go to so many things, like I've read so much or gone to so many things or asked people for the answers, and you really just have to write and start writing. It sounds obvious, but I feel like it's really important to just get the words down, and even if they're terrible, you can kind of go from there. Like when I was writing Maz and Bricks, I kind of promised it to Jim a long time before, and I was like, yeah, I'm writing this play, should be ready by April, then like May, then June, then July, and then Jim emailed me being like, we're having an AGM, so if this play actually exists, it would be great if you could email it to me. And I was like up till midnight finishing like half the play, being like, oh, I've ruined the best opportunity of my life. And then I sent him half the play, and he actually commissioned it. Then he said he really liked the first half, and he was willing to take on the other half of it. And I was just so grateful in that moment that I had at least written half. So I feel like anything is better than nothing. That's another point. Okay. I think Gavin talked about the spiral and like looking down at yourself, and I think some people talked about like continuity of support and like investing in people, and I think that's so important. Like, I feel like we really need to think about like our careers or our journeys as like an up and down thing, but heading somewhere. And I feel like so many artists, especially like of my generation, like we're under pressure with money, or we're under pressure with, you know, we're in this kind of volatile industry, and obviously we're all theatre people here in the room, but there's so many people outside who have said, I can't do this, it's too unstable a career for me, like I have to bow out because I have mental health issues and I can't live with this, you know. And I think continuity of support is so important, like saying like you're not just a one-hit wonder, like we'll read your scripts afterwards and we'll support you over a longer period of time, or like, yeah, you can't tie everything neatly up in a bow over a year, a project might take longer than that. So I think both as artists and people working in the industry, like I think like it's kind of like in some ways cutting yourself some slack, be like, okay, like I had a bad few months, but I know that I've got this thing coming up, or I know that I can ring up Gavin or Jim and I can say, okay, I've been silent for a while, but can I chat to you again? So, I mean, I suppose that applies to industry people and people working in the industry, but it's just about having that culture of, I suppose, supporting each other, like in any way that we can. Even supporting each other as artists. Like, I know, like I'm looking around and I see like loads of people in kind of at my level who could just as easily be kind of talking here. And I think I've had so much good support from them, and I think it's really important that we just kind of, that we encourage each other, like not only through schemes, but also in our lives. That's another point. Yeah, my next note is kindness and good vibes. I think Rosaleen said that so well as well, that like we just, like that's a really amazing thing about working with Fishamble. Like, we've had a really weird year, I think, in terms of everything that has come out with Weinstein and Me Too, and you know, Waking the Feminist before that. And it's really interesting because I guess I talk about it a lot, and lots of people perceive me rightly as a feminist and kind of challenge me on things. And there definitely is a backlash. I think like a lot of men, for whatever reason, and are uncomfortable on some level with what has happened. And I'm not pointing fingers at all, because I do think that kind of overnight, loads of young men were just automatically in the wrong, like without us ever educating them as to why, but suddenly saying, you're gonna lose your job now because your WhatsApp messages are filthy. Like, you know, so I think we're at this really weird period of time where things feel like they're shifting, and they're shifting really fast, and there is a big divide between us. So I think we have to really keep pushing forward. Like, the statistics show, like, we still don't, I think there's a lot of people who are like, yeah, okay, ladies, you've had your moment. Like, or someone said to me recently, oh yeah, a woman won that award. Guess why she won it? I said, why? Because she's a woman. He was like, they had to give it to a woman. You know, like, I hear that a lot. Like, a woman didn't win something rightfully, or I wasn't commissioned rightfully, or whatever it was. And I think we have to keep pushing forward, but we also have to come together. You know, we have to kind of build some kind of bridge where we're all in the same boat, all the weird metaphors. And I think like a huge amount of that comes back to kindness. And Fishamble, and especially Jim, they're leading like a kindness revolution. And it shows that you don't have to be horrible, you don't have to be abusive, you don't have to be power hungry. Actually, like, you know, success breeds success, and kindness breeds kindness. And like, it's so difficult as well in this industry. If you're like, look, if you're on Facebook and Instagram and everything, like, you're constantly comparing yourself. Everyone in the industry is constantly saying, what have they got going on? Where are they bringing their stuff? And I think it's so important to realize that we can all like champion each other. And so like, we need more companies like Fishamble, or more schemes that are just opening doors and saying everyone's welcome. As as a playwright, I think a huge thing is to like pretend that you're a really ignorant 19-year-old. When I started off first, I just like I said, I just didn't take no for an answer. I'm embarrassed when I think back on the people I rang up to basically say, I'm class, let me put a play on here. Like looking back, they must have just been like, lol, and put the phone down. But I think there's like, it's hugely important to just like, to be like, okay, like I remember being at a course once and someone was like, you know, if you want to make a play set in a field full of lilies, like just insist upon it. And if they try and downsize your stage, just say, no, I'm going to take this play elsewhere until they give me a field of lilies. And I feel like that was a really good piece of advice, because so much we write for people who we think would like our play or would like to commission us, or like, oh, I better put less actors in this play because it's more, you know, and of course you have to deal with practical constraints, but I think we really have to encourage people to like dream big and like write the things they want to write. Like I think like the reason that Fishamble is such an interesting company is because they tell stories. They're not really obsessed with gender quotas or representation or visibility. They want to tell stories, and that's so important. So I think like as a playwright, like find out what's most like burning inside you. Like mostly they're the plays that will be good. Like the things that you've been like laboring over for ages because you think they're topical, they probably won't be that good, or someone else will write it before you do, or you know. So I feel like everyone has a story in them that's specific to them, and it might sound obvious, but I really think we need to, yeah, like creatively brainstorming, imagining you've loads and loads of money. Like hopefully the money will eventually come to you. I have a small section here about like theatre and activism. I feel like so when I was in university in Edinburgh, I fell in with a group of kind of mad, radical Scottish lefties who were dying to divorce from England. And it was really interesting because they were really fascinating thinkers, but I never felt like I fully fitted in with them. Like I never felt like on Palestine demos or on whatever it was, I never quite felt like I deserved to be there. But I feel like I have found my place in like politics or activism or whatever is through theatre. And I think we can really change hearts and minds through theatre. Like I really do believe that. And like I've kind of written about things that were often quite issue-based. Like I have a play about anorexia that overshadowed, that won the Fishamble Award, and that's the thing that became a short series on BBC. And through that I've ended up working with like an eating disorder charity called Beat in the UK, and just like speaking to those people who are affected by having eating disorders, which is a lot, and obviously campaigning for repeal. And I think there's such a strong place for theatre in society in terms of getting to people in a way that politics just can't. Like even now, like the debate is so exhausting. We are all so exhausted by, I won't even say the R word, you know. But we were touring Maz and Bricks, which was about that, and I was really worried that people would just be like, I don't want to go to this. I'm sick of watching the debates on TV. I don't want to hear the word abortion ever again. But people were the opposite. They came and we had post-show discussions, and people brought their grannies, and then people would put up their hands and say, I'm actually a no voter, but your play really made me think. And I think, yeah, I just think we can't, it's so easy to think, especially in, like Rosaleen was saying, like in the world of Netflix or TV, or like we all want like instant things to consume. And I think we just need to remember as well, like that feeling that you get when you're front row in a play, and you're like, you come out and you're just like, you're hit by a bus, like almost like that moment we were talking about when Ruth and Gavin were discussing, like that moment where when you see a dancer move, it's like that inexplicable moment, like that you can't really put words on. And I think theatre has that in terms of changing people's hearts, so we shouldn't forget that. Someone just waved me for time. I think that's everything.
Thanks so much. That's great, Eva. Thank you very much. Despite what Eva says, in my power-crazed way, I'm going to grab the microphone now again and speak to you. Yeah, very interesting, just in terms of the relationship between playwrights and dramaturgs. So somebody mentioned to me the other day that Tony Kushner apparently gives quite a sizable proportion, I think 20% of all his royalties to his dramaturg. So there's a controversial thought to think about. So speaking of important dramaturgs, our next speaker is Bjarni Jónsson. We first met Bjarni and his colleagues from Iceland. We were in Wiesbaden in a festival there, a fantastic festival of plays from all over Europe, and we were doing a play called The Pride of Purnell Street by Sebastian Barry, and we met all the Icelandic guys and just connected and hit it off with them immediately. And we kept in touch, I suppose, over that time. And then Bjarni runs a fantastic festival called Local International Festival in Reykjavik with his partner Ragnheiður Skulladóttir, and we went over with Fishamble Work, and other companies have been over to Iceland as well, to the local festival. It's a fantastic festival to be in. And then we did a work in progress in the Dublin Theatre Festival of a play called Silent by Pat Kinnavan that we've been touring for a long time. And I remember it's a play, if you've seen it, about all sorts of things, about a homeless man and about what we're silent about, and it's influenced by silent movies. So silence is very much a part of it. And I remember Bjarni afterwards saying to me, oh, that'd be great, because it's about silence, have you thought of recording the whole play and playing it, and Pat stands on stage and doesn't say a word, and he's completely silent. And even though we haven't done that, it struck me as a really interesting dramaturgical question. Like if a dramaturg's role is partly to ask one provocative, interesting, possibly the silver bullet question, then that was a really interesting one, because we came back to it many times, discussing it and talking about it, and what we'd be silent about, what we would talk about, what would be recorded, what would be spoken live, and the question kind of infiltrated our thinking about it a lot. Bjarni and Ragnheiður have been over. You might know them from being part of the Make programme, and also working with Broken Talkers. So we're delighted you're here with us today, Bjarni. So this is Bjarni Jónsson. Thanks.
Yeah. Hello. Hi, everyone. Thanks, Fishamble, for the invitation to the conference, and happy 30th. It's great to see a theatre company thrive for 30 years. I mean, they're relying and building on new plays by people who have dedicated themselves to playwriting, so it's definitely an achievement, and of course a result of a lot of hard work. So it's an honor to be standing here. Jim already told a little bit about our ties to Ireland that we've been kind of cultivating for now 8 years. Started out actually with us putting a little bit of money into the production of Blue Boy by the Broken Talkers, which meant that they kind of got on to do the project, and they kind of became sort of associate artists with us, although we are not. I mean, we run a festival and we do a lot of stuff, but we don't have a venue or anything like that, but we're kind of co-producers in the sense that if we like someone's work, if we like somebody, we like to work with them, we will put in a lot of effort in making that happen. So since then I've done dramaturgy on Have No Mouth and The Speech, and now we're actually currently working on a very exciting project with Mary Coughlin and Mongoose. So that's supposed to be on in November, as far as I know. But in my input here, I want to try and filter out a couple of thoughts that I have on writing for the stage, and the people on the receiving end, the audience. And remember, this is all up for debate. What I'm going to say, I've jotted down. I have loads of thoughts on theatre, but I jotted some of them down here. As a writer, I've been on a journey that started out in the world of Pinters and Millers, but it has taken me more and more into new territories of theatre and performance. And which is actually the reason why I asked the folks at Fishamble to introduce me as writer / dramaturg / producer, a man carrying a lot of hats. I still write plays, but they are influenced also more and more by my work with other artists. Start with Athens. I went to Athens a few weeks ago as a part of the entourage of Iceland Dance Company. The company had been invited to perform at the Onassis Cultural Center, and I actually had served as a dramaturg on this particular project called Sacrifice, a festival of common things made holy. And it is indeed a festival. comprises of 4 different works that combine dance, performance, music, and film. Choreographer Erna Ómarsdóttir, visual art. Okay. Is it on? No. Yes, it's on. Visual artists Matthew Barney and Ragnar Kjartansson, and music by Bryce Dessner of the National. So it's a festival with 2 intermissions. The audience can also visit a marketplace featuring representatives of different belief systems, local artisans, vendors of food. It's a concept that revolves around the idea of art and religion being of the same origin, and that by making things holy on stage, we are able to redefine the term itself however it may suit us. So this is a picture from that event. 8 dancers playing guitar and dancing, and they do it really well. I also did put in some writing, creative writing for Sacrifice, including a text about the 7 stages of death. I also wrote a so-called hate yoga session, which was a kind of a quirky workshop based on the assumption that whatever the content is, you can do it in the form of yoga. So there I was in Athens, writer / dramaturg / producer, but luckily more or less playing the tourist, which meant that I walked around a lot, observing ruins and rocks. And I also admire the remnants of the Dionysus Theatre at the foot of the Acropolis. And actually, I found the ruins of this city, or the ancient Athens, really bewildering and amazing. I mean, long before capitalism, the Greeks in 500 BC did have sponsored front row seats in their theaters. So it was really going back to the roots somehow. Yes, I also remember the words of the Austrian writer Thomas Bernhard, who used to describe theater actually as an ancient perversity. But the world of Pinters and Millers with roots in Athens. When I started writing in my early 20s, I would actually gobble up everything written by Arthur Miller, Tennessee Williams, Harold Pinter, Beckett, Bertolt Brecht. I thought these authors were actually the heart and soul of contemporary theatre. And in the late 80s, early 90s, when I was finishing my degree in theatre studies at the University of Munich, I still carried with me a very strong notion of the role of the playwright and its importance. And by then I had added some other names to my list of favorite writers, Bernhard, Kreutz, Heiner Müller. And as far as I could see, not much seemed to really rattle the nice little literary cage I was building myself as a true believer in the power of playwriting. I moved back to Iceland, to Reykjavik, started working in the business, dramaturg, translator, playwright, things were good. I got my work produced by major theaters, there was even some interest from abroad, but something always kept bugging me. I felt somehow imprisoned, not only by the traditions kept alive in the theater, but also by the role of the playwright and the position of the writer within the theater apparatus. This frustration then led me to explore new grounds and try to exceed the boundaries I had respected before as a writer and a dramaturg. We all know that the stage is an empty spot in our everyday life. It's a venue where we agree upon a different version of reality. The stage is a contract, a place of imagination played out by actor and spectator. Everything that enters this particular spot will gain significance in the minds of those attending. The spectator focuses on characterization, words, actions, and accompanying visuals in order to understand, and that's the compulsive behavior of our brains. We want to get the story right, get real. That being said, I think there is a relentless search for the real in theater and performance. A search that actually now influences the way we act or perform, and also the way we write. So if we get back to Athens for a moment, we know through the dramaturgy of Aristotle that something in our psyche actually strives for harmony of content and form, and trying to stick to structure merely for structure's sake has never brought any luck to a playwright. So we must admit that through the centuries, writing has evolved along with our perception of the human. Now, the classical structures described by Aristotle are still experienced in movies, series made for the screen, Netflix, there's been talk about Netflix today. But dramaturgy actually continues to be in flux. It's not written in stone. We need only to go back 60 years when the German theoretician Peter Sonti cleverly pointed out the faults in the dramaturgy of Ibsen and Strindberg, explaining these as being a part of a major transition in playwriting at the time. It was a departure from the dramatic to the epic. A little more than 100 years ago, dramaturgical thinking had taken a leap when playwrights came to regard epic influence as an integral part of contemporary writing. While plays such as Ibsen's Master Builder or John Gabriel Borkman remained stuck in the character's past, never really getting anywhere near the traditional drama, pioneers of the so-called epic theatre, Brecht, Piscator, or Thornton Wilder in the States, recognized the problem. They acknowledged that the industrialized human, now severing his ties with the idea of an almighty God, was being constantly influenced by his surroundings and past. And this stood in total contradiction to the definition of the classical drama character, who actually didn't need a past because his role in the play did not involve any digging for the truth. He was bound to wind up as a victim of exactly the tragic events the drama set out to expose from the very beginning. So the concept of epic theatre, this particular approach to the performing arts, definitely did help authors to resolve a great dramaturgical dilemma in the latter part of the 20th century. And its impact has actually lasted well into our times, seeing that the methods and tools developed within the frame of the epic theatre have become standard in contemporary performance. Some talking to, for example, about things like actors speaking directly to the audience, the use of stand-up situations, the use of things like film footage, clips, sound recordings, microphones. And today I believe that we're actually experiencing yet another transition in writing and dramaturgical thinking. This time, however, we might describe the situation as a dilemma of presentation. But it's still a problem that affects writers as much as actors or directors. It's time to talk about the internet. Now, we talk about ancient Athens, we talk about before and after Christ, but in theater we do better to add before and after the internet. How much theater people have come to realize the major consequences of having this virtual global connection in operation around the clock, I don't know. But more and more, theater seems to have lost its important status as a source or a medium of information. Before the internet, we could go to see a play, maybe from a foreign country or an exotic region. We could learn something about human existence in those places. This rarely happens anymore. Plays do not easily cross language borders, and we have other sources of information than theater. The complexity of our contemporary life and our interconnection has emptied theater of much of its journalistic aspect and impact. It has always been difficult to write for the stage, write a credible text or play that the spectator is able to connect with. So-called masters of drama, people like Ibsen, Strindberg, they had their own problems finding an adequate dramaturgy for the writing. But every writer must imagine his audience as being made up of highly intelligent people, observing, open-minded. Without this imagined audience, there is no way to write a text that evokes the interest of actors, performers, directors, or in the end, public itself. So how can we properly react to an audience that carries in general a lot more baggage to the theater than before? By baggage, I mean that theater goers are more conscious, they're better informed, they're much better at decoding visuals and text than they used to. It don't matter if they're young or old. Everyone is being bombarded with all sorts of produced material, staged events in various media available at all times. Even the word dramaturgy has become a household term which people apply freely to real or fictitious things. And the audience don't need as much text anymore to be able to connect with the play. They dislike detailed exposés most of the time, and some hate being confronted with too much drama on stage. Some even say that though they like theater, they don't like acting and drama. I hate theater, someone said to me once, meaning actors delivering a play. So the contemporary playwright has to dig deeper and deeper into his toolbox. It's a challenging world, especially for us writers who grew up on the Millers and the Mullers back in the days. Now, apart from working on my own plays, I've also worked with artists and collectives, as mentioned, such as the Broken Talkers. And for the past 6 years, I worked with a group called Kryddplir Theatre Group. Actually, this has been one of the most exciting parts of my journey as a writer recently. Of the 4 members, I'm the only one who's not performing. And because all of our pieces are based on improvisation, it remains my particular task to collect and manage sentences and ideas that may sooner or later accumulate and form a script. Usually later, because procrastination and agony are the main driving forces of our work. So the performers play a kind of a saturated version of themselves on stage. The work is a continuing exploration of the persona and its presentation in theatrical surroundings. It is each and every time a play on the self and must be understood as a response to our blurred notion of reality and the ongoing quest for the real in theatre and performance. The dramaturgy follows a non-linear path of anti-climaxes, so that the presentation may at times come across as both chaotic and erratic. And actually we had a piece in the Dublin Theatre Festival in 2016 at the Project Arts Centre called Crisis Meeting. I don't know if you have a photo of that. Chandrika, is she anywhere to push the button? All right, okay. In Crisis Meeting, we weave together in one process the writing and the staging of a piece while keeping our personal history in mind and observing ourselves in our daily routine. The 3 performers aim at restoring their self-confidence in a play by explaining to the audience the group's working methods, but opening up to the public has its consequences. The exposure, the sharing and oversharing, and the dramatization of personal experience produce a stream of consciousness where dramatic and private matters blend in with mundane and farcical elements. So it should be the next photo. Yeah, that's the one. This is actually in the space where the thing was created, so it's a kind of a run-through we had. The text itself is an adaptation of disorganized meetings, conversations, and openings that were part of the working process leading up to the staged piece. So I have here a lengthy quote from a review here in Ireland, but I'm not going to go there. So don't worry. But the work with this group calls into mind an interesting aspect of the discussion in contemporary theatre and performance. It is the question of performing or acting on stage and its effect on writing and staging, and if there is at all a divide. What is a character? How do we present it in text and on stage? The idea of an actor, somebody who's trained to embody a fictitious character, has been criticized in recent years, I think mostly due to the overwhelming popularity of film and television. The fact that you need to perform or have a presence rather than act in front of the camera has led us all to form a negation of a kind to declamatory acting style. And this has influenced both work on the screen and in the theatre. But theatre has always thrived on the events going on in the world. It has a way of absorbing new technology, ideas and trends, and develop new methods of presentation. So the overflow of information and the ever-growing expectations from the audience side are only 2 topics of many that come to mind when I think about the current situation in writing for the theatre. So I guess in the future, playwrights will still be going strong, but they might feel more and more pressure as there's a growing number of theatre goers who are bringing a lot of content to the theatre and would like the theatrical production to unfold before their eyes almost as a sort of a blank canvas. These spectators will demand fewer and fewer words from the playwright. They will demand less and less information. They will attend a show in the hope of being able to project upon the stage whatever content, context, visuals, images, intelligence, and emotions they have boiling in their hearts and minds. They won't be any different from other people who have lived before. They'll be as gifted and as smart as the inhabitants of the ancient town at the foot of the Acropolis. But I have a feeling that even if we still are in Athens, or we still visit Athens from time to time, we're out of Athens. That there are new movements being created around the world, physically, intellectually, and these waves that relate to our interconnection and interaction will call for new narratives and new and hopefully exciting dramaturgy. Now, to close this, living in Germany in the days of Miller and Müller, I was always amazed by their theater landscape, of course, but also their strong belief in newspaper publishing. Other German-speaking nations join in this tradition. In Switzerland, the Neue Zürcher Zeitung, a Zurich newspaper, made history by always being the last to print the news. Their agenda was, we want to bring the news, but we're not interested in breaking them. I remember that the paper would wait for 2 or even 3 days before printing its news about whatever was going on in the world. By then, the staff had gathered enough information to be able to deliver a pretty thorough briefing on the top stories. It was slow journalism. And they still may be doing this, I don't know. But as a concept, I actually think it may fit the performing arts. Maybe it could help in re-establish the theater's credibility as a venue for trends, debates, and issues in society. That's the only way to build or rebuild the idea of the theater as a place of contemplation, where writers and others work on the abstracts of time, space, and on bringing about social healing. So that's it. I'll be here this afternoon.
Great. Thanks so much, Bjarni, for that. Lots of provocative thoughts there to think about further. Thank you so much to all the speakers who took part this morning. It's been a really fascinating morning. And in the afternoon, we're going to have a panel discussion. We're going to be joined by our international guests, by Ruth and by Bjarni, and joined also by Pamela McQueen and Sonia Kelly. And then we're going to open it up to the floor and bring it into a more general discussion. We're slightly over time, but we're going to kick off on the dot of 2:30. So if you could come back maybe 20 past, 25 past, please, so we get going at 2:30, and then we'll begin the second part of the day. Thank you.